Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I'm the Victorian Cowboy, and welcome back. Today we are wrapping up Chapter 4 of The Blood of Elves. We went through a very large chunk of this chapter for this one. Next week we'll be through all of Chapter 5, which is about 66 pages. So, in the end of this chapter, we have Ciri being part of the caravan vanguard with Geralt. And Triss doing much better, at least at the beginning. And then, of course, while they're out on the vanguard, Ciri, there's a fight to culminate everything in which some things are revealed. And we'll talk about all of that in a few moments. So first off, talking about Ciri, she's nearly 13 now. She's acting like one of those rebellious teenagers. I should know, I spend all day with rebellious 11, 12, and 13-year-olds. So it was kind of interesting to see her as she's riding off, ignoring Geralt and trying to get away from everybody trying to tell her what to do. That was completely believable. And it was interesting to see what she was noticing and what things she was on the lookout for as she's riding out to examine what's up ahead. It was also interesting to get to see more of what's inside her head. We get to see the fact that she is still thinking about Sintra and the battle or the massacre at Sintra and what the Novigrad individuals did to her and what the war is for, like what the Scoia'Tel are attempting to do and how they're being manipulated by Novigrad into fighting Novigrad's enemies for them and whittling them down. And I think Yarpen has a really good quote that I think holds a lot of meaning, and I think it's a good motto to live by, and that's behave as so you don't have to ask forgiveness. Basically, it's about doing the right thing, doing what you know is the right thing, or doing what you believe is the right thing, so that way you don't have to be forgiven or seek forgiveness for it later. Because if you have to seek forgiveness, is it necessarily the right choice? And now I recognize that there are some things that it may be the right choice and one might feel the need to seek forgiveness for. But all in all, I do feel there's definitely some truth to the idea that do your best, do what you think is right, because if it is right, you won't have to ask forgiveness. But yeah, so I really like that quote, and Ciri's thinking about it. It's really interesting to see all these competing ideas be juggled in Ciri's mind. So you've got Geralt and the neutrality, and then you've got Yarpen and talking about, live as so you don't have to seek forgiveness, and Triss talking about is our job to protect those who can't protect themselves, and Ciri siding with that. And there's some truth to that. I know I talked about it a couple of videos ago, but doing what you can to protect others, especially those who can't protect themselves. And Ciri points out that's what a witcher does in fighting these monsters. Is you're protecting people who don't have the skills or the knowledge of how to protect themselves from these things. Even if, as the snippets from the like monstrum that you get at the beginning of the chapters talk about witches as being these vile things. Especially seeing how Geralt works it, and like Vesemir, we tend to know better than that. Now, the thing that I thought was really interesting was Geralt and Ciri in the ruined palace in Sherwood, I believe would be the pronunciation. It's an interesting spelling, but when I actually said it, it came out as Sherwood, so almost Sherwood, but anyway, that's a different mythological place. Kind of a cool hearkening with the white roses that continue to grow for Elarena, and why Geralt is staying neutral in this fight. He has more knowledge than the other members of the fight, and he understands what's at stake. And he explains that to Ciri, who in turn, once she has that knowledge, also understands. And so again, it's looking at this battle in context. I think this is a great example of showing how if you aren't talking about things in context, people are going to misunderstand, misinterpret, or not fully realize what's at stake. And so showing her and telling her the story of what happened 200 years ago, in which the elders of the elves went off into the hills, but Elorena and Sherwood and that whole palace and many of the young elves decided to stay and fight. And Geralt points out that only the young elves can reproduce. So essentially, if all the young elves go and die, even though elves live for extraordinarily long times, 400, 500, 1,000 years, whatever it may be, they can't continue their species, their bloodline. And with Elorena and the troop from Sherwood going off into battle and being massacred, they've only recently gotten to the point where they can start rebuilding their elvish population, which is something that humans seem to be able to, according to Yarpen, do remarkably well, rebuilding and repopulating. And like Geralt points out that most of the human settlements, so Oxenfurt and Novigrad and several of the major cities, are actually built on the foundations of cities of the elves. So that's interesting. But the idea that Geralt recognizes that were he to take up arms in this battle, he would be working towards the extinction of a sentient, like, higher order thinking race. Because his thing is, he can fight monsters. Monsters don't think, they just act. They seek prey. They prey on the weakest. They prey on people who can't defend themselves. Werewolves, vampires. The vampires are higher level thinking, but they still prey on people. Lycans, wraiths, things like that. And so it is... he's neutral because he doesn't want to have a hand in slaying people who are misguided by the Novigrad or Nilfgaardians. Nilfgaardians, excuse me, not Novigradians. Nilfgaardians. Because he understands that they're playing off of their raw emotions, and that battle cry of humans to the sea is actually meant to rally them into distracting them. And of course, Ciri takes one of the roses, and in pricking herself, has a vision. She becomes the source once more, and sees that her companions back with the caravan are in trouble. That whole group of Scoia'Tel are going after them. And so, of course, her and Geralt run back, and Ciri ignores Geralt again for a noble cause. She wants to save Triss, who's down, and Yarpen is fighting, and I really enjoyed reading the fight sequence. I thought it was well written, and I could see some of the things that were going on, even in the chaos. I can only hope that sometime it might get done up in say, like an animated format or in a film format so we can see it. Because I think there's some really good visuals in this book, or some really cool sequences that would be great to watch. And then in that battle, like, just seeing, like, so Polly, for instance, freezes when he's faced by another dwarf who doesn't freeze, and he falls to a dwarf. And then there's Yarpen, who's fighting like the devil against all of these people, and the commissar, who takes several arrows and continues fighting, and Triss, who is wounded in the beginning. She hits her head as she falls out of the wagon, and Ciri drags her to the side. Geralt rides around and doesn't remain neutral. And I think what's really telling is, after Ciri freezes in battle, because she's never killed someone before, though she knows how to fight and she does use it, she parries, but she's not super on top of it. I really like the example of, as much as she tried to pull her sword, it stuck in her scabbard. And it's a sense of things are moving in slow motion. She's in shock almost, because this is it's not the first time she's watching people die, but it's the first time she's in a position to have to take lives in addition to not dying. And you could almost think she's flashing back to that night in Sintra, with the knight with the winged helm and whatnot, with PTSD and the trouble she'd be having there. So eventually she does pull the sword and is able to parry a blow, though not super well. Parry it well enough because she was trained, but she doesn't have the grip on it or the wherewithal to really overcome that. Then, of course, Geralt swoops in and saves her, as does Yarpen, as does the Commissar to a degree, even though he's tanking arrows like a boss. And she ends up passing out and waking up towards the end of this. And she was fighting this female elf. And so she wakes up and she's looking at the dead, and Triss is trying to tend to the Commissar, and it's just chaos and blood, and you can see that the things they were escorting were actually just like rocks. It wasn't anything worthwhile, even though they were supposedly carrying something to help the war effort. And Ciri looks down at the elves and then looks at Geralt and says, "You didn't stay neutral." And Geralt's reply is, "You're right. I didn't stay neutral. But you're alive, and Triss is alive." And that's and it's implied that the only reason he didn't stay neutral is because he was defending the people he cared about. And he recognizes what he did. And Ciri recognizes what she did. To the point where she takes the rose off her shirt where she had placed it, and drops it on the elf that was going to kill her, but froze when she saw the rose. And she says, farewell, Sherwood," and she can't finish, and Geralt says, "and forgive us," which is really powerful, because everything that's happened with the caravan and all this talk and all these ideas she's had thrown at her, she realizes that sometimes you don't have the option to behave so you don't have to ask forgiveness, especially when you see the full scale of what's happening. And even Yarpen is beginning to realize what's happening, because Yarpen realizes that the whole convoy was actually trapped to see if he was a traitor, which the Commissar Vanker, I can't remember his name right now, he's the Commissar, actually dies trying to make sure they know that Yarpen is loyal and trustworthy. And the knight who's in the shining armor, as he's described, is standing there, and it's not said that he's the same one as before, but it's implied that he has the same sort of ideas as the other one, which is, this is all non-humans are a danger and should be expelled or thrown into concentration camps or internment camps or some sort of thing until they can be dealt with and wiped off the face of the earth. And as you can see, like, the Scoia'Tel are not just elves, but they're elves, they're dwarves, they're gnomes, they're any non-human or anything that the humans would have gone against. And now Yarpen is sitting there, he's looking at his crew, he's lost 2 of his crew, he only had 3-ish or 4 to begin with, and he's like, he doesn't get a whole lot of time, but he's now questioning whether he made the right decision too, and he recognizes he's going to have to ask forgiveness, even just forgiveness from himself, because now he's carrying this guilt of his crew died on a mission that was never going to do anything besides just prove if they were, true to the cause or not, which is, quite frankly, a bullshit mission. And it shows that you don't trust your men, and if you don't trust them, I don't know, it just raises a lot of concerns and problems, both for the reader and for Yarpen, and it's putting you in these really strange situations where it makes you rethink what a conflict, like a large-scale war, or even a small-scale guerrilla war like this, is really being fought for. What is either side going to gain from it? The Scoia'Tel don't have numbers to really withstand that, unless Nilfgaard comes and uses them as a distraction. Conversely, the group there with Yarpen and the Commissar, they don't have any real thing to gain from large-scale conflict with the Scoia'Tel. I mean, if they could work towards peace through diplomatic means, it would be a lot better. And you wouldn't have senseless bloodshed. But unfortunately, it is what it is in this. And you end with this really hollow feeling in the pit of your stomach after seeing the aftermath of the battle and knowing what happens. So we'll have to see what comes up next, because Ciri is still on her way to school, Triss is still on the mend from the dysentery, and Geralt, who we haven't really seen things from the perspective of in this book, is still there as a guardian and a protector, and still cares about those involved, and is trying to do what's best for them. Though I do think one of the other telling quotes Yarpen has in this is, in talking with Ciri as he's been eavesdropping, is, "Don't mistake someone's kindness or loyalty or concern for something that it isn't." So Triss interpreting Geralt's not affection, yes, but concern for her as something more than just, "You are my friend and you are in trouble," into something more romantic, I think could be, it's definitely problematic, and I'm interested to see where it goes, but it's definitely wise advice that I think many people should take advantage of, because I feel all too often people interpret or misinterpret or just get confused by goodwill, like people acting with good intent, and it becomes confusing because we're so caught up in what people are what the media tells us, what we see in books and movies and whatnot, and very few times do we hear someone's being nice just to be nice because they're friendly or because they're a friend and they care about you. Most of the time we see it having to lead more to a romantic relationship that doesn't necessarily have to be there. So, all things considered, we've got another chapter to read for next week. The next video should be out by Wednesday. Wednesday for me, Wednesday the 20th, and that's on Pacific Coast time in North America. Thank you so much for watching. Please comment. This is a longer video. The next one will be longer as well because it's taking up a larger chunk of the book. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm engaged with the story. I want to keep reading it. I just wish I had time and didn't need to sleep. So, thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our video. We do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, give us a like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought, and as always, have a good one.